hesitant to make this video because some ideas in these videos are very complex, and you need to know a lot of math, maybe have a master's in computer science and some quantum physics, and they all are kind of like loosely related to each other. And just I don't expect there to be a lot of audience for this video, but hey, I might expire, and there's a lot that I didn't say. There's a lot in philosophy, in Sufism, and in computation that I know, and I want there to be some record. Maybe this is just gonna be a record. Anyhow, so most of the computers that we have today, they are equivalent to a theoretical machine. It's called Alan Turing Computational Engine, which is like a punch card type of machine, and you can add and subtract using binary, or move the head of the punch card and make a memory of your addition and subtraction. And basically it's been proven, and this is a fact, that almost all of the operations in math, like integration, derivatives, whatever you can think of, hyperbola, hyperbolic functions, e to the x, addition of series, whatever that is a function of any sort, just about can be broken down into an algorithm of thousands of steps or millions of steps of addition and subtraction. For example, multiplication is simply so many additions, and then division is so many subtractions, so on. So the Alan Turing machine basically is equivalent to most computers that we know around us. And then there are functions that they say that they're uncomputable functions. Like I'm not sure myself how the definition goes with this, but I have a feeling that they end up in like a loop that cannot be resolved after so many finite number of operations on any computer that's equivalent to Alan Turing computer. But the human mind, consciousness, will realize that this is a stupid computation, and just gives up, kind of senses recursive and infinite loops, and gets itself out of it. I have a sneaky feeling that these uncomputable functions are kind of related to a theorem that's it's called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I just have a feeling. I have no direct line going from here to there, but okay, the incompleteness theorem says that you could start with a set of axioms, a set of basic principles, and in any axiomatic system, basically in any kind of computer that can compute and go through so many steps, you always can find one operation that it's self-conflicting, or infinite loop, or that. So basically it's saying that I think that the computers are related to this concept that of uncomputable functions. So so this brings us to limitations of computers that we really know, or Alan Turing's type computers, that they follow algorithms. They take any kind of function, break it down into an algorithm that can be an addition or subtraction. But when you realize this, you realize that hey, the world must be more complex than this addition and subtraction. There is a lot more to the physical world than that can be broken down into this. And I'm gonna kind of go on the link to this. This is kind of related to Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Okay, so for example, when the reductionist wants to model a phenomena, okay, he can only do it to a certain length scale. Like when you get to the level of atoms or level of particles that are within a certain length, you know, the length of like a molecule or atom, then the Heisenberg phenomena, uncertainty, becomes dominant, and you cannot pinpoint both the location and the speed of a particle. There is a certain uncertainty. Okay, this is kind of like the same kind of saying that not every function can be computed, or the same as Gödel is saying that hey, these axioms, no matter how beautiful and complex you make them, they cannot really describe all phenomena. Or another way of saying this is that reality, and I'm using the word reality in the sense that a physicist would use, which is like all the phenomena that's happening in the physical plane, and all the particles and all the energies that are in a given region of space. Okay. Reality is always richer than any kind of description that mathematical or otherwise that a reductionist could come up with. Okay, so reductionists could write equations, and these equations would describe stuff all the way down to a certain length scale, and then that length scale, the uncertainty principle becomes dominant. So it's like the universe has a mind of its own after this length scale, and it just does what it wants from moment to moment. And then once it has done that, then yes, you can write the equations again and go. So I think all these ideas are kind of related, even though I cannot kind of pinpoint how they can be translated into each other. They are equivalent somehow. Okay, in the Sufi master has a book. Okay, this book on philosophy. It's a book of poems actually, and then he goes through the steps, blocks of major ideas or concepts and experiences in this book. Okay, so I had a teacher, and he was the top student of the Sufi master. His name was Mr. Kassavi, and we were studying the first poem, the very first poem. And I'm telling you, Sufism is extremely complex, extremely deep. I mean, it took him. He was Hujjatul Islam. Hujjatul Islam means the person is like you get a PhD in religious studies, and then after he received his درجه اشتاد, the degree of being the full clergy, like most ayatollahs, they get this degree. Most mullahs, they have. It's not easy to get this. Okay, so after he got that, he kind of gave up studying traditional religion, and he became a disciple of the guru, Sufi master, and then he studied for many years under him. So it took him and it took us like 3 jalasa. Jalasa means meeting. Like every meeting is like about an hour, hour and a half. So I'm talking like 4.5 or 5 hours, and we went down on the translations and real meaning of this one poem. Okay, and this is the first poem that the Sufi master has on his book. Is called Ghazaliyat, which means his book of poems. Anyhow, I'm just gonna read the first line. Well, before I read the first line, try to kind of explain what's happening. There is a saying by Prophet Muhammad that says, whatever your mind, your head constructs, whatever theories, whatever predictions, whatever ghost in the machine that your brain constructs, this is a creature. This is like a ghost in the machine. It sits in the back of your mind, and it will fall onto you, like it will fall apart or fall in your face, because the real world is so much richer than this ghost that you constructed. This so this concept in Sufism is related to Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and also is related to uncomputable functions and the difference between consciousness and Alan Turing type computers, which is most computers are like this. And also the computers that compute functions, they are not the same kind of math that the mathematician would use. Mathematicians, they assume that there is infinite continuity. All the functions are written as if the function can be defined at whatever length scale, which is baloney. After like a certain length scale, the universe itself becomes discrete, like Planck length. You cannot divide it up even more, whereas the mathematician would say, hey, like you can go further and further, which is not true. And also the discreteness and Heisenberg uncertainty kicks in at certain lengths, and the function, if you really wanted that function to really look right, you have to look into other dimensions that they affect the 3 dimensions that we know. So really the 3 dimensions that we know are they arise from these other dimensions. They're a byproduct. So if you really wanted to write this function to at a smaller length scale, then you really need to kind of look at these other dimensions. Okay, so these ideas are pretty intense. You have to kind of know what is going on with the string theory and all that to kind of figure out. But I saw something similar to this function, because say for example you want there was one function that calculated the days in the year. Um, okay, and the way I think the function had to take a nutation of the planet Earth into consideration, and the fact that the Earth was more wobbly, more oblong than just sphere. So the original function assumed that the planet Earth was a complete sphere, which is not true. It was a homogeneous. But when you came down and you wanted the real function, you had to take all that stuff into effect, that the Earth is not homogeneous. It has a center which is very massive iron, and then outside is more silicon and other calcium. So it's not uniform. It's more massive on the inside, and also oblong, and also has mutations. And so when you wrote the real function down, the real function is like I think it was 11, 12 variables. Okay, so this what happens to functions, and the mathematicians are really wrong. If it doesn't work all the time, and then when you want to compute such a function, you have to take into effect that there is discreteness in nature, which the computers can represent. That discreteness is not continuous. Okay, and this is itself another form of math that's just written for the computers to be able to calculate functions that are continuous in the form that's discrete. Okay, so that's another problem, and really nature is not what mathematicians think it should be. Another thing that pops up is that mathematicians, they think that there is such a thing, such a number as an irrational number, okay, in nature, okay, which is really not true, because okay, so for example, an irrational number cannot be represented as a fraction, but if at some length in nature the nature itself is discrete, okay, so then yes, most irrational numbers can be represented as a fraction, which is that's the real math, okay. So that also avoids a lot of the mess-ups in mathematics that deal with irrational numbers and uncomputable functions. Okay, it's based on a fallacy that nature is completely continuous, which is not true. The nature at the Planck's length is discontinuous. Anyhow, so returning to this concept of that the Prophet Muhammad said that what your mind constructs is not real, is like the continuous mathematics that the mathematicians invent for nature is not true. The nature is more richer than what your mind constructed. What I'm trying to say is that nature, which is consciousness, is always richer than any computer that humans can construct. I guess this argument can be extended to AI, saying that human consciousness is consciousness, whereas AI is based on computers. But this is kind of like kind of difficult to believe in, because AI can become pretty smart, or much smarter than humans. Also because it computes faster, it can overwhelm a human. But the human, we have the ability to connect to the universal consciousness, I mean, I guess if the AI overwhelmed the person, he can say, pray to God to help me get rid of this robot. But that's last ditch effort. But this concept of the richness of nature, or the richness of consciousness, that it's richer than any computer, is very important, and comes up in Sufism too. I'm pretty sure it will show up in many philosophers, but this is not easy ideas or concept. Anyhow, the first line reads like this: مگر نور ازل برهانتت از این عجب شیطانی. May the divine light free you from this construct of the devil, which is like your mind constructs all these theories. مگر نور هدایت آردت بیرون از این ظلما. And may the divine light bring you out of this darkness, because theories and constructs of the minds, or what the computer can simulate, they are always inferior to consciousness, which is God, which is the universe is consciousness. And this poem is saying, get off your mental track and see this maktab, this spiritual path is a spiritual path, not your theories and intellectual pursuits or constructs. And also the Islamic motto, which is La ilaha illallah, no goddess but God. Nothing that your mind constructs, no beautiful goddess that you constructed and you worship, it can match what God is consciousness. But it has taken humanity all these theories and all these pursuits to kind of come close to these ideas. There is a lot in Sufism, and also many things that Bible or Quran say that they are description of consciousness, which means the consciousness experiences itself and represents those things in the material form as trees or rivers. So there is a verse that says that there is in paradise there is rivers that flow beneath the trees, but this is not material world. This is consciousness experiencing itself. Anyhow, I don't expect very many people to even get a clue what I'm talking about. This is hard. This is pretty intense philosophy. You really need to be very smart and have very good education. Also, know Sufism, and if you got some of these ideas, I would start with the math and try to see the analogy. Okay, there is another method that when the mathematicians they get stuck and they cannot prove a theorem, they try to find analogy in another branch of mathematics. Okay, hey, my stuff is research, and there is very few places on the internet, or even if you study Sufism, that you can really come across these ideas. Please subscribe. Okay, thank you very much.